Hello and welcome to another episode of the Whole People Group podcast. Whole People, we recognize that organizational excellence is deeply entwined with the well-being of its people, and our mission is to seamlessly integrate well-being with performance because we understand that when individuals thrive, so does an entire organization. Today, I'm joined by Charlie Mulraine. I've known Charlie for feels like a very long time in former careers as a professional cricket player and leaving the game. And Charlie's been instrumental in my pathway from a player to a former player with addictions. And today, we're going to talk to Charlie about some of the amazing work that he's doing for Whole People and outside of Whole People Group. Charlie, it's just a pleasure to be with you, mate, and I've been looking forward to having a good conversation.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, thanks very much for the warm welcome. Yeah, very pleased to be on the podcast.
Charlie, I know we can talk for a really long time about some stuff that we've both seen in our careers. Obviously, Charlie, you're a former professional athlete in rugby and cricket. You've had 20 years of working with the PCA, the Players Cricket Association. You've supported current and former athletes in their journey of well-being and performance and taking care of those holistic and pastoral issues and identity. There's a lot in there, but I just wonder if you might tell the listener a bit more about yourself and obviously because it's a Whole People podcast, the wins and the losses, please. We don't just do wins, the wins, the losses, the struggles, the good bits. Yeah, maybe just a little bit more about you.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot to cover. I mean, if I focus on what I'm doing now, so I specialize in career transition coaching. So I love to work with purpose-driven people where the work that they do matters to them. So it's people who are involved in jobs and careers where their identity is pretty closely entwined with what they do. I tend to find that they are highly motivated, they're committed, but also because of that, they face a lot of struggles. And the work that I do is to help those people who are potentially feeling stuck, lost sometimes, or disillusioned. I help them reconnect with I suppose the magic of who they are, what's got them to that point, what drives them. So a lot of work on identity and to help people understand how they can create some clarity and moving towards something purposeful. And that could be moving away from the career that they're in, or in many cases, it's actually reimagining the position that they're in and finding that they can tap into that magic in the place that they're in now. And I mean, when you look back, that you sort of understand why you do the work that you do. And now I look back now and I think it's obvious, it's perfect. I feel as if I'm doing the job that I was sort of born to do, because if I wind the clock way back, as a kid, and I was talking to somebody about this recently. As a kid, I was incredibly anxious. I worried about everything, and I compared myself to everyone else. But I had this talent in sport, so everyone, in their view, I was going to be a professional sports person in cricket or rugby. It was going to be one of those sports, and not knowing underneath that I was just worried. I was just sort of worried about absolutely everything, and I got a contract in cricket. So for many people thought, oh, brilliant, your life is sorted. But for me, that was sort of the start of the worry and the trouble. So I remember walking into that Warwickshire dressing room, and they had, people like Alan Donald, Gladstone Small, Tim Munton, Brian Lara, who just beaten the world record test score. They had world beaters. Admittedly, this is the mid 90s. It shows my age, but 90, 93, 94. And instead of excitement, which I wanted to feel excitement, I just felt inadequacy. And it was a battle of trying to put on a brave face. And all I saw were these incredibly powerful, successful people who seemed bulletproof. And what I didn't know at that time, and I found out a lot later in the work that I started to do with the PCA, a lot of those people were having the same thoughts as me. A lot of them were having these feelings of I'm not good enough, and they were comparing themselves to other people. But some of those individuals, they found different ways different strategies to cope with that, some less beneficial for them than others. You know, in some ways, I'm thankful I didn't go down that path. But people found a way to cope with the pressure and the expectation of being an elite sport. And that's probably something that's driven me all the way through.
I love that. And I think your experience of being in those environments, I mean, I've just written the word down here, imposter syndrome. You know, there's that feeling of like when you ascend quite quickly, or maybe your physical, when our physical skills outweigh our emotional skills, right? So I was elevated by people that were outside of my control. I'm 6'6". I was blessed with fast twitch fibers and I could bowl fast, right? But there was this period of time where I was elevated into an England under-19 team, and then I'm elevated into a cricket change room, and my emotional capacity, my identity hadn't caught up with what I was being expected to do. And there was this period of time there where I felt like there was no real structural understanding of, you know, the deep-seated feelings of inadequacy, the childhood trauma, the underlying addictions, so here am I on the external bowling 90 mile an hour at 19 years old.
Yeah.
And that's people's reality.
Yeah.
But underneath, you know, the fear and the doubt and the unresolved trauma, because we now know, we didn't know this 20 years ago, that pressure will bring unresolved traumas to the surface, and that structural identity work. And it's always something you know, you've helped me personally, that work that you do at the level of the identity. It feels to me that that's where it started for you, was when you came into that changing room. When I came into that changing room, and there's that gap, right? Like
it's
there's
that pressure
gap.
when you're properly put under pressure. The spotlight is on you, and there's no place to hide.
No.
You know, there are only so many people on a staff. In those days, it was 20 odd people on a staff, only 11 on the field, obviously. You know, I've got all the gear, and I'm wearing the gear, and I'm feeling like a fraud. You know, I've got the bear and the ragged staff, and I've got, you know, the new tracksuit and everything, and I'm thinking I shouldn't be here. How did I get here? You know, I knew I was an okay player, but I just felt I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And it was horrible battling with that. And you've got coaches in those days that there wasn't a lot of empathy. And I can understand also in those days as well. It's a tough environment, and you know, they want people who can cope with that toughness. I think there was perhaps no understanding of, just because somebody isn't coping at that point doesn't mean that they can't be helped to be able to cope. And you know, when I was released, well, sacked, you know, that's, you know, that when
Sacked,
yeah, it's dressed up as, you know, released, but essentially you're sacked.
Yeah.
And I remember being, you know, and I preempted this, so I talked myself into being sacked before it even happened, like months before. So I had a year's contract that was renewed, had a second year, and like halfway in, I was thinking, oh no, I'm not playing well enough. I'm not playing well enough. I'm going to be sacked. I'm going to be sacked. You know, and I was sort of predicting this future. And I remember being asked into the office and then told that my contract was not going to be renewed by the CEO. And I just went home. No, actually, I went to where I was staying, cleared out all of my stuff, and I pretty much bagged everything up, put it in my car, and drove home. And I went into, it wasn't depression, that's too strong, but I'd lost who I was completely. I was so uncomfortable even seeing my friends, because in my eyes I was a failure. You know, 2 years into a professional career, and some were at university, some were in jobs, and my life had come to an end. And in my eyes, my career had come to an end, and I had no idea who I was. So it added even more weight to that feeling of inadequacy. It's like, if I can't, that's my skill set, and I can't even make it doing that, what on earth can I do?
Exactly.
And it took a lot of self-reflection to get out of that and to start sort of piecing things back together again.
So is that one of the big things that you're speaking? I think you are speaking a language which so many people are probably feeling and thinking, but they're not. It's almost like the unsaid, you know, this feeling that we all deeply feel inadequate and scared and worried. And if I think about the work that we do with senior leadership and leadership, I know that exists there. more than anywhere, right? Because the pressure's more. I mean, I
Yeah,
work with, equity partners who are supreme lawyers, but they just never really feel like they're enough. And then the pressure of more, which comes in
yeah.
sport. You're as good as your last performance. Is that the big issue that we're facing at the moment? That people feel, are people over identifying with what they do, and as a result, they don't really know who they are? Or is it, what's the big problem that we're facing?
I think there are a lot of problems at the moment. I think for me, it feels like there's an identity crisis, that there's a feeling of we're losing touch of who we are and what matters to us. And sometimes it takes something, bad to happen. Hopefully, God willing, it's not something too horrendous, but sometimes it takes something, an intervention to happen to take us out of the environment that we're in, so then we can see it for what it is, and then we can start to work out, does this connect with me? Am I aligned with it? Can I change it? Can I help change it? Do I need to share this with somebody who can help support me to change it, or do I need to step out? It doesn't have to be, I need to get out of here. It could be, what can I do to influence this environment that I'm in? And I think it's fueled by all of this uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty in the world at the moment. You put on the news and it's the most depressing thing ever, with wars happening everywhere. That's what it certainly, it feels like. The economy is incredibly unstable, and people can't plan anything. People are cutting budgets. They're not investing, which has a knock-on effect to all of these other people who maybe are relying on the people at the top of the tree. And the landscape of work is changing. A job for life doesn't exist anymore.
Mm.
So we've got that. The rules of the game have changed.
Mm.
And we've got people who have gone through all of that pain, who are now evaluating things, going, I'm not sure if this is good for me anymore, but I have to because I've got this mortgage, I've got this
Mm.
family, this expectation. And then you've got this new generation. I know that we've talked about this before. You've done a lot of work here. You've got another generation coming through that I think sadly is being maligned. I don't think they're understood. But certainly
Mm.
the Gen Z people that I've spoken to, they're highly motivated and they want to
Yeah.
make a difference, and they're very passionate, and they're
Yeah.
very driven, and they're very values based. So they're looking at this environment going, what's going on here? And you've spoken to me about certain environments where they're looking at the people at the senior level going, I don't think I want to have that job because look, at that person doesn't look well.
Yes, right.
So there are battles happening everywhere. And I think if we can try and help organizations, I mean, this is where, Whole People Group is, I love the mission of it, and to be a part of it, is to help organizations see that this isn't about lowering expectations. This is high performance, and it should be. You want to be the best, you want to get better, it's growth. But how can we do it in a sustainable way where people don't suffer, and actually you get the best out of people? Like I've got a client that I'm working with at the moment, and they described a former work environment that they worked in, and they said it was toxic. Those were the words.
Mm.
It was toxic because it was so big. There was a lack of accountability. There was a lack of communication between the different levels of management. So nobody cared because no one else cared. It was unsafe as well.
Mm.
Psychologically unsafe was the word that was used, but also unsafe in terms of what they were doing. No one is prepared to put their head above the parapet because you're just going to get shot at.
That's right.
And then you have people who are either getting burnt out or leaving. So really good talent is leaving. So you go to, you think about our cricketing experience. If you can have a culture where people are signed up to the vision, it's tough because elite sport is tough, business is tough. But if you want to get the best out of people, because you've wasted years of nurturing somebody for them to leave because the environment's rubbish. So it helps everyone to think, right, how can we create an environment where it is aiming to be the best that they can be, where it's values driven, where people can connect with it. We can support people where we can, and if it's not the right fit for somebody, then we'll make sure that exit is as humane and supportive as possible. So I think that's what Whole People Group are talking about. It just feels so badly needed.
So what I'm hearing is that the problem is like disconnection, right? So we know when you go into a sports change room, and I know this happens in the corporate world where the values are on the
Yeah,
wall, right? And everyone goes, That's not the values," right?
yeah,
Because they're just words. There's a disconnection from the behaviors and the words of the culture, right? So the
yeah,
value might be generosity, but the culture is selfish, or the value
yeah,
might be integrity, but there's loads of stuff going on over there that no one knows about, and there's a
yeah,
disconnection there, and there's a disconnection from the leadership and the people, and there's a disconnection from the identity of the people and the role that they're meant to be playing. There's, for me, I can see what the picture you're painting is. There's a sort of disconnection about when people leave the workplace. They just disconnect. People just go,
mm,
right, you're done. So I just feel like it feels to me that there's just lots of disconnection between people and their own values. I did a workshop for a very big company, real high performance company. And I asked a group of 50 of their highest performers who knows their personal values. And I got not one hand up,
mm.
right? And it was astonishing. And I said, well,
It's almost like it.
how are you
It's
meant
almost
to
like a better.
navigate anything?
I know, and it's almost, and then it becomes a test. I've been in that situation as an employee, and we've kicked off a morning session, and somebody said, right, who knows the values, and then it becomes a test, and
Right.
it's the wrong question in a way. If somebody said, right, what do you think this organization stands for?
Mm,
What do you feel if you had to sum up what this organization is like, how it does its business, how it treats its employees? What would you say to somebody? Now that would be more interesting rather than somebody saying,
mm.
"Well, I think it's, oh, is it
Cooperation,
yeah,
integrity, honesty.
yeah,
It's always the same things.
fairness, hyper. I don't know. It's yeah, no, no, I totally agree, and it's how they're lived. That's the thing, isn't it? Words are words.
Yeah.
It's how they're lived, and I think that it helps also for with that disconnection. If the top of the tree understand how everyone's role, excuse me, is contributing to that bigger mission,
That's right.
that I think if every single person within that chain can feel that we're all pulling together, and that role where somebody might feel it's a small cog, but it's explained to them how it's part of this bigger vision, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
makes everything go. So if that didn't happen, everything else would fall over. You start to get people who actually buy into it, buy into the vision
This
of the
word buy
company.
this word buy-in. I mean, we know this word, right? Because you get a new coach come into the changing room, and he's got to get the buy-in of the senior players first. And
Yeah,
if he doesn't have the senior players, he'll never have the team. And there's this knowing that you need buy-in, right? If there's no buy-in, there's no cohesion and this connection between. There's also a buy-in of the vision and the mission, right? So we on everything we do is around vision and mission, because who's going to get on a boat if they don't know where it's going, and
mm,
you want to know that you're headed in a destination. It's like, yeah, I'll get on the boat. So,
yeah,
so where are you going? Oh, it
mm,
doesn't matter. I'll just get on your boat, right? So bringing it to your work, because I mean, I've experienced your work. You've helped me immeasurably, and I know that your work, this connection. When I came out of rehab, I was almost a blank slate, right, and with lots of poor habits from before. Your work really helped me locate and go deeper into who I actually am, and you help me connect to my own values through our conversations. And how specifically does your work approach this issue, um, within whole people and in your
yeah,
own work as well?
yeah. I mean, you've summed it up well. I see my sessions. I mean, there's a structure. So when I work with somebody, obviously I need to understand where do they want to get to. So what are the challenges? Where do they want to get to? Do they have a vision of how things would like, how they would like things to be? But I always go back. So one of my first exercises that I do with somebody is we go through somebody's life story. We go through their autobiography. They write it. So I actually ask them to write it. Tell me about your life story. Write your autobiography. All those pivot points, all of those highs, those lows. Go back and put something together. It could be written. Sometimes people draw a bit of a drawing. It could be a river, whatever it is, and we start to pull out those high points, those low points, those challenges that they've overcome. We talk about how did you overcome them? Tell me more about that. What skills did you use then? Were you lacking something? Did you have to learn something? So it's all about connecting somebody to what they've done before, and so that you can see the evidence that if you're live right now, well done. You are a success because you've navigated these trials and tribulations and you've got to the point right now. So we start doing that, and I often find that it can get quite emotional. I've had a lot of people who've started crying because they're connecting with that emotion. They're going back to that time that they had in their life. And then we do move forward. We go, okay, well, where are you now? What's missing now? What are you looking for? And we start to build a sort of a vision for, well, how do you want things to be? Let's build a bridge to get there. And also the concept of, I know a lot of people, I mean, I used to believe this, that, tap into your true self. And I sort of find that a little bit limiting, as if there's only one true self, there's only one path. And I think very much with careers, it's all about exploration. It's about experimenting, and it's talking to people and finding out information and learning more about yourself and going, well, if I go in that direction, it's not the wrong way. It's not the right or the wrong way. It's just something. It's just another path that will get you eventually where you feel is right for you at that time.
That's right.
So yeah, possibilities. I love the phrase of, there are almost like various different possibilities for somebody, rather than that is who I am and that is what defines me.
I love that. And I see your work being something. So if I take someone who's deeply unhappy in their job, in their role, then it's very easy to think that the role is the problem and the company is the problem. But actually, it's a disconnection. It's the disconnection from what we're bringing to that role, right? So it's a bit like I had a psychologist once. I was deeply suicidal at this time, and I opened up to him about that, and he said, Simon, I want you to go home tonight, and I trigger warning at the moment because this is, we're going to go there. He said, I want you to go home tonight, and I want you to take your own life, but I'll see you tomorrow morning. And then he had a little smile on his face, and he said, do you know what I mean by that, Simon? He said, it's not that you want to do something. He said, you want this part of yourself to die, and you want this part of yourself, so let it die and bring something new to this. Why don't you let this die and go home tonight and let that part of you die, and actually come back tomorrow and bring a new sense of energy to this thing. And it was his way of saying that. And I think this is a lot with roles and jobs. It's, you're a parent, right? The amount of times you feel this sort of like sense of like it's a challenge, and it's like, actually, this is I need to reconnect with my reasons as to why I love this, and then you can bring that sort of, you bring your own heart to it. And I wonder whether there's lots of people, and we are loyalty. Companies want loyalty. Retention is just like such a huge issue at the moment. And I wonder whether the answer is, if you had a workforce of people who are connected back with themselves, I don't think people would need a new job. I think they would find that they can bring lots more of themselves to that. And then at least if they then do that, they might need to move.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think you need the freedom as well. You need the broad-minded thinking of the people who hire and fire to create that space for people to do that.
Yes.
Because I think that's often where the parameters, the limitations come from the environment that you're in. Well, you can't step out of that box. You can't go there. You can't do that.
True.
So I can understand. We've got to think in real terms as well. Sometimes roles need to be like that. But I do wonder if you can allow people to just grow a bit more, you will get the best out of people. There's somebody that someone I spoke to recently, I've just started working with, who was talking about, for many years they were always trying to fit in, always, and it just caused pain and resistance because they couldn't fit in, and they were almost trying to find their tribe, find that group of people or that environment. And they just learned over time that once they'd stopped that fighting to want to resist, wanting to fit in, and the phrase that they used was they were just on a different timeline to everyone else. And there was that acceptance going, well, that's okay, they're doing that, I don't have to do that. I might do that, but it might be 5 years or 10 years down the line. Suddenly that pressure was off. I think there's a lot of internal work that can be done that can help people just reframe where they're at the moment. Because I think with career transition, career change, when I speak to people, and even with cricket actually, the program within cricket, often coaches were worried that we'd be going into their environment and essentially telling players, stop playing cricket, get a job. And it's not. In many ways, working with the PCA and working with people who are there for the players to help understand what they want to get out of life, they have longer careers because they start to love what they do. They start to understand that they're not just a cricketer; they've got these other parts of their identity. And I think the same in business. That if you can give people freedom to understand and express what they're really good at, what they're passionate at, can you direct that? Can you give a bit of freedom to that? You're going to have happier employees. You're going to have employees that are more bought into the environment, and they're less likely to leave. So it's a win-win. It doesn't have to be, it's not working, move, because often it's a bit like a tortoise just carrying the same shell on their back. If you haven't done that internal work to work out who you are, what you really want life to look like, you're just going from one problem to the next problem to the next.
And you'll take, exactly, and as my wife and I always say, wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
Right. And if people don't do that internal work and they change, they'll just find themselves exactly where they are. Charlie, we've got 1 minute left, which is good because this last one is putting you on the spot a little bit. So I'll do this really quickly. Many years ago, I had a near-death experience. It's an interesting thing to talk about as a whole podcast in itself. And as I was actually dying and thought I was going to die, and I started to actually leave my body in my near-death experience, I struggled because I had nothing to say. And this was 10 years ago. I had nothing to say and I had no time to say it. And I realized in that moment how important it is that we have something to say and leave. And so I put the associates and people on the podcast on the spot with this one. And that is that it's a slightly out there question. You are about to die. Okay, we're all going to die. This is Whole People Group. We don't shy away from that. You are about to die and you have your iPhone and you have 15 seconds to leave a voicey. You leave it in your recordings.
Okay.
What do you say? In 15 seconds, what do you say in that voicey?
I have thought about it in terms of what would I say to my son? What would I say to him if it's my last bit of wisdom? And I think it's something that I wish somebody had said to me. Something along the lines of, you're not your last win. And you're not your last loss. The important thing is where you choose to be next.
Brilliant. Charlie, it's been an absolute pleasure. And we'll do the longer podcast soon because we've got a lot to talk about.
Likewise, loved it. Thanks very much, Simon.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Cheers.